thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you introduce yourself first? Let us know who you are, what you do, why we're here today, anything else you want us to know about you.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. So I'm Amber Frauenholtz, and I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and a restorative wellness practitioner. And what that essentially means is I'm a functional nutritionist. So I work with mostly women, people with cycling female hormones, essentially, who are in different stages of life, maybe pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, post-pregnancy, but I work with them to identify imbalances in their bodies and build a plan together to help bring those things back into balance so that they can feel well again in their skin. I do love working with postpartum women, especially because I had a pretty rough postpartum experience with my first son. He's 6 years old now, but I had some pretty gnarly postpartum anxiety, and a lot of the things that we're going to actually talk about today helped me kind of get through that time. So that's why I'm here. And I just feel like this area of women's health is just kind of underserved. There's not a lot of information out there, not a lot of resources, especially for new parents in particular. And so that's why we're here today, just to talk about some easy things that you can do to feel better now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. I'm really excited for this conversation because I think that, as a pelvic floor PT, a lot of these questions pop up in conversations with my patients. And just as a person who lives with a lot of stress, like depletion, I think, is something that we experience prior to pregnancy too. And I know that so many people that I see as a pelvic floor PT in the postpartum recovery, like they're bringing things into that recovery that they've been dealing with possibly for like 10, 15 years before ever becoming pregnant. So yep. I am super excited to learn from you today. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Rebecca Medansky. I am a pelvic floor physical therapist. I own Ladybird PT, which is a clinic in Austin that specializes in helping people manage pregnancy pains, prepare for birth, and recover postpartum. And I am thrilled to be interviewing Amber today about this topic. So I haven't seen anything else come through in the chat. If anyone has questions for Amber, feel free to drop them in the chat whenever you'd like. But let's get into the first question, which is, why is nutrition an important consideration as a new parent? Why does this matter?
Okay, awesome. So this is a good one to open it up with. So nutrition and the food that we eat, it really dictates how we feel overall. It's foundational to our health. And the answer, or the reason why that is you have to kind of take a step back and go back to high school biology, if we can all remember, like back then, where we were talking about cells and how our cells function. Our bodies are made of millions of cells. They all have their own specific jobs. And in order to do those jobs, they require building blocks or energy. And we get those building blocks from the food that we eat, right? So that's the vitamins, the minerals, the fats, the proteins, amino acids, all of those things. It comes from food. And when we don't get those building blocks, then our cells, they can't do what they are, what their purpose is, what they're set out to do. They don't thrive. So in turn, if our cells are not thriving, then we're not thriving. We're not feeling good. We might feel exhausted all the time. We might have digestive problems. We might have some mental health issues pop up. But the most common thing that I see among new parents, so this time frame of like early motherhood, early postpartum, all the way through your kids are 10 years old, is burnout, right? So that's kind of the common symptom presentation. And burnout, you may have heard it be referred to as depletion. So it's a very similar thing. You just feel chronically exhausted all of the time. And it's just because you're not getting those building blocks that you need in order to produce that energy. So another piece of that puzzle, though, is, if you're not getting what you need from the food that you eat, like what are you eating instead? And oftentimes in early parenthood, we need foods that are fast. We need foods that are easy. You don't want to think about it. And a lot of those common foods that we will grab first, they don't have the nutrients that we're needing, but they also have additives and other things included that just puts additional stress on our system, where we have to work harder to kind of get those things out. So those two things in common or together, so not getting the nutrients you need, plus maybe too much of the things that you don't, can cause those, symptoms to arise because our cells essentially are not getting what they need. So to answer your question, the reason why, nutrition is so important as a new parent is because if we're not getting those nutrients, then we don't have energy to chase our kids. We don't have the fuel to produce breast milk, all of those types of things that are so important to us. This starts with food.
That makes a ton of sense. Like you hear like food is life, food is energy, you are what you eat. And that's a really helpful explanation as to like why specifically that matters. And I know that in my world on the physical recovery side, postpartum, we talk a lot about relative energy deficiency syndrome. Is that something that you're familiar with?
I don't go into detail. Maybe I've heard of what it is, but not the name.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something that I think like as soon as you describe it, people are like, yeah, of course it's obvious, but it really does affect your healing and nutrition. Like even when I'm talking to people about urinary incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse and pain with sex and perineal tearing, C-section scar healing, nutrition, something that kind of needs to be brought into the fold because of relative energy deficiency syndrome, which is this idea that the calories and the nutrition you're taking in are less than what you're putting out. So some people call it dieting. Right. But in the postpartum period, you're not sleeping, which affects essentially your energy stores. You are stressed, which affects your energy stores. So if you're not taking in and putting in the right type of energy into your body via your food and supplements, then you are relatively energy deficient, which like I think every postpartum person can relate to. And of course, the severity of that deficiency can actually affect scar healing and tissue healing and postpartum recovery in a really tangible physical way. So that makes a lot of sense from the perspective of physical therapy and physical health too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, making sure you're getting like enough collagen and amino acids and those kinds of things in, especially in that early time frame, is going to be pivotal, right, for that like pelvic floor recovery, because you're having to rebuild all of that tissue. Makes total sense. And I feel like, super aligned there with those two different outlooks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this leads kind of perfectly into our next question. And I apologize if everybody can hear my cat screaming. It's like very loud to me and I don't know if it's coming through.
I can't hear it. I can't hear it.
And this is the question I get from my patients all the time. I mean, how does somebody know if they are experiencing postpartum, I'm going to kill this cat, postpartum depletion and burnout, or if they're just tired because they're not sleeping as well and they don't have the time and they're stressed? I mean, like, where is that line and how do we know we've crossed it?
Yeah. Okay. So this is an important topic to talk about before we get into some of the tips, because it is hard to tell, because parenting is really exhausting. Like taking care of small humans is so tiring. You can be eating the best diet in the world. You could be, exercising, getting all the rest you need, blah, da, 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 da. However, if you have really active kids that you're chasing after who are not sleeping very well, then you're going to be tired. And that's normal. So I like to think of it as like normal parenting exhaustion is something that can actually be remedied if you are able to get those, 3 or 4 nights of sleep, 6-hour chunks in each night, and you're starting to feel better again, right? That energy and vitality is coming back. Or you're able to, do a bunch of self-care, like you get out for a spa day. I know that doesn't happen very often, or something like that. And then you come home and you feel restored and you feel that energy come back. It's not normal when you can't bounce back, right? So when that exhaustion just feels chronic, even though your kid slept the whole night through and you slept the whole night through, you wake up, you still just feel like, like you just can't get up out of bed. You don't have motivation to move forward. And the other key piece of it is those exhaustion symptoms, just feeling so tired and unmotivated, are paired usually with other types of symptoms that you often see in burnout. And if you don't mind, I just have a slide here that I'll share. It has some of the symptoms listed here.
Yeah. I think that I just gave you permission to share. So you should be able to put it up now. That explanation is really helpful, because I think that like all of us, all people navigating the world, especially in like today's climate, are used to feeling tired, but that balance of like, you can do things to bounce back definitely like makes it make a lot more sense to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. So just to expand on that. So these are some slides from a presentation that I typically give, and it's all about avoiding burnout, which is that depleted state, right? When you are pregnant and you are, you go through the marathon of birth, and then if you're nursing potentially and just taking care of a new baby, you're healing in the fourth trimester, all of those things combined require a lot of energy, require a lot of nutrition, all of that recovery time. And when those things are not met, like we talked about on the last question, you can start to experience these types of symptoms, right? So this depleted state. So that chronic exhaustion that we just talked about, but it's accompanied by some mental health issues. So you might start to get a little bit anxious, or you might notice that your thoughts are leaning towards the depressive side of things, or just feeling super unmotivated. You may feel like you're failing at being a mom, or trying to be a working mom and take care of your kids, and all of those just like overwhelming sort of invisible load of motherhood type of thoughts. You might be suffering from a lot of brain fog, like that, just kind of like you're walking through a mist. Like you just can't seem to get like clarity in your head. Inability to sleep, even though your kids are sleeping well. And then again, that like low motivation. So these are all sort of symptoms that accompany a syndrome called postpartum depletion, or you can just think of it as burnout. It's an easy way to, we're all familiar with the term burnout.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that?
Yes, please.
So postpartum depletion, so this is more like you're approaching this from the perspective of what you're taking in, the food that you're eating is not giving you, it's not setting you up to feel good. But these symptoms are also really quite similar to postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. So how do you, and I know that postpartum depression, anxiety can be affected by postpartum depletion, but how do you figure out whether somebody needs to start with the nutrition aspect or the mental health aspect, assuming that our postpartum people don't have the capacity to necessarily do both at the same time?
Yeah. So this is such a great, I love that you like went there, because that's exactly where I was going to go next, because there's this whole idea of burnout and depletion, but there's also PMADs. Mm-hmm. So PMADs are postpartum mood and anxiety disorders, things like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. And I like to think of it as typically someone who's suffering from one of those conditions are probably burned out as well, and likely started out burned out and it kind of progressed into something a little bit more severe.
Like a cycle.
Yeah. And the difference is, so if you just take depression, for example, when you have a state of depression, it never feels like you get relief, right? So you wake up and you're just so unmotivated, so low, you just feel like there's no hope, and you can't experience that joy anymore. Like you don't look forward to anything anymore. I mean, you're just constantly kind of stuck in that depressive fog, which really is awful and sucks. That's the difference. So with depletion, if you're not fully like depressed, you still are able to like experience those moments where you're like, oh, I'm feeling good. Like I'm excited to go see and play with my kid, but you just have sort of those like ups and downs. And that's kind of the difference. So if you are leaning more towards experiencing that PMAD all the time, so it could be OCD, anxiety, depression, that's when we want to definitely seek additional help, right? So can you go talk to a therapist, seek out a psychiatrist, or join a support group, or any kinds of those supports? That's definitely going to be an important piece of the puzzle while we go after the nutrition side of things, making sure you're getting all the building blocks you need in order to produce neurotransmitters, in order to get, the serotonin production going in your gut, those kinds of things. So it's kind of, you have to attack it from both sides. Mm-hmm. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's what we see in postpartum recovery, again, from a physical standpoint, because that's really all that I can speak to. That's my area of expertise. And I think that, like on one hand, when I talk about these things, I always want to be mindful of the fact that access is a huge issue. Like being able to afford the support for mental health and physical health and nutritional health is a huge issue, because when we see people for postpartum recovery, usually they also need mental health support. They also need community and social support. They also need nutritional support. They also might need a fitness trainer to help them like stay on task and coordinate their schedule and figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And so like postpartum recovery is such a beast, which is part of why I was so excited to have this conversation, because I think that nutrition, at least for the people that I see, oftentimes nutrition is like the last piece that gets brought in. And I think that this postpartum depletion conversation is kind of making the argument that it should be like ground level, like one of the first things that we do.
Yeah, totally.
So that's helpful.
Definitely one of the first things. And one of the nice things too about nutrition is that, and we'll talk more about this too in future questions, but just the smallest changes, just like the smallest little tweaks can have such an enormous impact on how you're feeling. And you don't have to have any support for that. You don't have to go out and hire a person like myself, like a nutritionist, in order to set a goal for yourself to drink enough water in a day. And just making sure you're hitting your hydration needs, that's going to do huge, changes for you in your energy levels. So it's just, that's kind of like the good part about it, is you can just pick a couple little tiny things and experiment on yourself and get some good benefit. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, I love free support groups. Like, if you can, community is huge for new moms, like being able to commiserate with other women who are going through the same experience as you. Like, oh my gosh, that's the best therapy I think I could have ever gotten in that time. So if you are struggling, and you maybe don't have the means right now to go see like a therapist, seek out free support groups from other women, because that is so helpful.
100%. And if you're in Austin, and for those of you who are in Austin, Partners in Parenting has amazing support groups that they have. I know that they have scholarship options. I know that they have sliding scale. So Partners in Parenting is an amazing group to look at for support. And this is the perfect segue into our next question, which is, what are the most important nutritional factors to avoid or heal burnouts? Like, what are those things that people are missing? And maybe also like a small bit of what can we do about it?
Yeah. Okay. So buckle up, because I have a lot of tips that I want to go over. I want you, whoever is watching this recording or on the call right now, I want you to get some good, tangible, action steps that you can take from this conversation.
Also, if you see my hands moving, I am taking notes. So don't mind me.
Awesome. Before I dig into what those things are, though, just kind of a blanket disclaimer, right? So there are broad recommendations that are going to be impactful for everyone. And if you implement these recommendations, you will definitely see some improvements, but there is a bio-individual component, right? Depending on your specific state or what might have been happening in your body, we might need to change your recommendations based on that. So I just kind of want to give that caveat. And that's what working with a practitioner is for. So just a disclaimer there. And then I'm also not a doctor, right? So I am a nutritionist. I don't treat or diagnose illness. So before I give these recommendations, just want to make sure to throw that out there. So with that, I'd love to share my screen again, if you don't mind, because I think it's helpful to have a visual.
No, go for it. Always. You should still have the ability to.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see a woman eating over her baby? Yeah. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? I didn't hear you. Okay.
Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
I muted myself so that you didn't have to deal with the cacophony of speakers in the background, but yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. I love this picture because I feel like, who hasn't done this? I definitely spilt food on my kids' heads so many times when I was nursing or just trying to hold the baby when you're trying to eat. But there's I think about 5 things I want to talk about today, if we have time for all of them. So the first one is around digestion. So this isn't even about specific foods to be eating, right? This is about how you're eating. And this will be super beneficial to to everybody. All of these tips are going to be applicable. So what we talked about in the beginning, if you are not digesting your food well, if your cells are not actually getting the food that we talked about that your cells need in order to function properly, then you're still missing out. So you could be eating kale or whatever it may be, and if you don't digest it well, then you're still not getting those nutrients and those building blocks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we want to do is some simple things just to try to get our digestion working really well, right? And one of the easiest things that you can do for digestion is just to slow down. And it's a kind of a really hard recommendation for new parents, because you're kind of inhaling your food. You got to eat before your kids start screaming and all of that. But this is one of those areas where you just kind of do the best that you can and know that good is good enough. But ideally, we want to sit down when we're eating. We want to take a couple deep breaths before we eat, because digestion is not something that functions when you are stressed out, right?
So if you think about versus parasympathetic nervous system, right? We need to get into that rest and digest state.
Exactly. We want to get into the parasympathetic side of things. If you think about it, it makes so much sense because, back in the day, you don't want to be pooping your pants when you're running from a bear. Like, you want all that to turn off. But we don't have bears chasing us. We have kids that are screaming. So we need to just take a deep breath before we eat and then chew our food really well. Because that's actually the first step of digestion. And most of us are just like 1 or 2 chomps and we're getting that food down. But if we can just add a couple more chews, then that's actually going to break that food down even more before it gets to your stomach and make a huge difference. So just remember, rest and digest, be relaxed, chew your food really well, sit down when you can. The other piece of it is making sure that we're hydrated. So we're actually going to talk about hydration next, but hydration is going to be really important to produce all of that gastric juice that we need to churn up that food, get our mucosal lining and our guts like really in a good state, all of that good stuff.
This conversation is making me very hungry, and I don't think that's the goal, but it's happening.
And then some recommendations around types of foods too. So we want to make sure you're getting protein in your diet, and we're going to talk about protein specifically in a minute. Probiotic foods are great for digestion. So that's like yogurt, fermented vegetable foods like sauerkraut, like fermented veggies, kimchi, all of that stuff is amazing. What else? Fermented tea, like kombucha, that's really nourishing and your microbiome loves that. And then you can also eat foods that have digestive enzymes in them that help you actually break down your food while you're eating them. And those are like papayas, pineapples, mangoes, bananas, those like enzymatic fruits. They are great for digestion. So that's all I have on digestion.
And everybody, if you have questions, like we said earlier, you can drop them in the Q&A or in the chat, and I'm going to keep checking it while Amber goes on.
Okay, so now that we've gotten that one out of the way, let's move on to some actual like food recommendations.
Yeah, sounds
although
good.
I guess water is not food, but let's talk about hydration.
Recommendations.
Yeah. Okay, so hydration is gonna be huge for energy levels. Most people are chronically dehydrated, right? We're walking around and we just don't realize that we're chronically dehydrated because that's our normal state, right?
What's made that so much worse for me is wearing a mask in the clinic. Like just the added difficulty or like the added hurdle of taking the mask off to take a sip is like, has completely changed my ability to drink water throughout the day. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, that is so true though. I mean, you're constantly wearing that mask and it is just like a whole nother step. And then you also feel, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, you feel a little self-conscious, like raising your mask to try to like take a drink.
Oh my God, absolutely. Like I have to find a place where I'm like, and now it's a little bit different, but like before I was like, nobody can see me. No patients are in the waiting room, not in the room with the patient. Like when you can take that sip, all of a sudden, like my water intake tanked.
Oh my goodness. Is it getting better now?
Well, now that I actually, this is really relevant. This is a bit of an aside, or not very relevant, but a little bit of aside. I went to see my PCP maybe like a year ago. And I was talking to him about how my anxiety had increased dramatically and how I really wasn't sure why, because I was doing all of these things. And he asked me what my water intake looked like. And I was like, I really don't drink water all day anymore because I'm in a mask all day. And he was talking about the adrenal response to dehydration and how significant that link is. And he was 100% right. I increased my water intake back to normal. And my anxiety went back to like my baseline type A anal anxiety rather than like the extreme form that I was living with for seemingly no reason. So I am super interested. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm really interested.
No, I love
hydration.
I love this because that is like a prime example of why making sure that you're hydrated is so important, especially for new parents, because this is probably one of the easiest things that you can do that takes hardly any time and will have a huge impact on the end goal, just feeling better, having more energy. So the guidelines. So how much water are you supposed to drink then, right? So whatever the nutritional therapy recommendation is, whatever your body weight is, take that number, divide it by 2, and whatever that number is in ounces, in fluid ounces, that would be the minimum amount that you want to include every day.
That's body weight in pounds, right?
Yeah, body weight in pounds. Divide that by 2, and then whatever that number is the fluid ounce intake that you would want to aim for. That's minimum. So if you are nursing, if you're someone who is breastfeeding, you are going to want more water, and you'll know because you're just parched like 24/7 when you're nursing. The other piece is caffeinated beverages, right? So coffee, it is a diuretic. And what that means is the water that you're drinking alongside the coffee, it just goes right through you. I mean, you may have noticed like when you drink coffee, you have to pee a lot. That's because you're not really absorbing that coffee or that water very well. And that's why we want to compensate for that. So if you're going to drink coffee, we want to make sure we're drinking a little bit more water. And the rule of thumb is for every 1 ounce of, coffee, you'd want to drink 1.5 ounces of water. So that would be, an 8-ounce cup of coffee would be 12 ounces of water to offset that diuretic effect. The last piece is electrolytes. And are you a big electrolyte drinker?
You know what? I'm not, unless I'm like on a long backcountry hike in the summer and I'm like, this is something that I feel like I should do, but I really don't have, outside of like getting significant food sickness related things and then adding electrolytes to my waters is not something that I think to do on a daily basis.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think everyone can benefit from adding electrolytes in on a daily basis for this reason, because electrolytes are minerals, and you can think of them like the spark plugs, of the body. They are things like sodium and magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus, I think is the fourth one. What they do is they control how well water moves through cell walls, right? And the goal is to make sure that your cells can intake all the water that it wants and actually feel that hydration, feel plump, like soft skin. Like we want that feeling. And without the electrolytes present, then you're not getting the optimum water flow between the cell walls.
Is there a brand of electrolyte that you like? Because I know that when I look at electrolytes, like when I'm in the grocery store and Costco, it's just like 50% sugar, 50% other stuff.
Yeah.
So what do you like to recommend for electrolytes?
Okay, so I like Mother Nature's electrolytes, which is sea salt. So if you just buy unrefined, like high quality sea salt, there's no like additives, it's not table salt. All you need is a little pinch, just like a tiny little pinch in a big 16-ounce glass of water. And that will give you sodium. It gives you magnesium. I mean, sea salt is full of all kinds of minerals, not just sodium. So that's all you need. Yeah, just a little pinch of sea salt. If you want to do an electrolyte powder, I think they're great for workout recovery. If you're planning to be outside, like I love them for that, especially if you're nursing. Like I love getting some electrolyte powders in. Element is my favorite brand. It's like the LMNT Element. Mm-hmm. And what else? I like Ultima. It's like ULTIMA. Are you putting these in the chat? I can't see the chat. Okay.
I'm not putting them in the chat. I was trying to make a list of things that I would put in the chat, but I will. So we're going to say,
okay, perfect.
Electrolytes. I'll put them in the chat now.
Okay. So that's hydration. Are there any questions about hydration? I can't see the
I haven't seen anything come through yet. So
okay.
I'll keep monitoring, but people also might be waiting until the end. Element is ELMNT.
It's LMNT, and you pronounce it element, but it's just LMNT.
Cool. I just sent that directly to Emily, so apologies. I'm gonna send it to everybody.
Awesome. All right. Now we're going to talk about protein, which is one of my favorite topics, and also one of the most impactful things you can do, especially. Yes.
Sorry to pause you. We did just get a question about electrolytes.
Yeah. Please.
Emily's asking, would eating sea salt provide electrolytes as well, or just drinking them? Do you have to put them in water?
Eating salt on food definitely helps. It's going to absolutely raise your electrolyte content in your body, but I think it's better to include it with the water that you are trying to actually absorb.
That makes sense.
So I would just put a little pinch with like a big 16-ounce glass of water. You don't want to have to taste it, because like drinking salty water and it's not that delicious, but just like a little pinch in there. You can also add like a squeeze of lemon.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So protein, and I feel like this is a good topic for us for you, like us specifically, this partnership, because you need a lot of good protein in order to heal tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're dealing with prolapse, I mean, any kind of pelvic floor injury, like we want to make sure we're able to rebuild that tissue and heal. And that's why protein is so important. So this slide, it's kind of a word dump, but all that's listed here are the reasons why we need to eat it. So we need it for tissue repair. We need it for neurotransmitter creation. We need it for liver function. It stabilizes our blood sugar. It stimulates digestion, which we talked about earlier. And it's really important for breast milk production. So if you are someone who's trying to watch that. So how do you get more protein, into your diet? And I have some recommendations. Okay, so the first piece of this is just becoming aware of protein. Like maybe, I don't know, anyone here thinks about protein too often, especially if you're in the early postpartum timeframe. You're just like, I see food, like just give me food. I need food. You're not thinking about what's in your food. So the big change here is just bringing protein to front of mind and being like, no, okay, when I go plate my meals or grab a snack, my first thing I'm going to ask myself is like, is there protein in this? And if there's not, then can I add some?
Mm-hmm.
Or
that was a tip you gave me when we met a few weeks ago. And that has been hugely helpful, just to have the awareness of like, oh, there was actually no protein in my breakfast. Like this is something that I should target for my lunch. Like just thinking about it more.
Yeah.
And I think the thing you said was start planning your meal with what the protein is and then build the meal around it. And that I feel like unlocked all of my protein confusion.
I know some of these things are just like little mindset shifts. Like, can you just change up how you approach building your plate at dinner time and start with the protein? And you want to aim for the palm size amount. So whatever your hand size is, that's kind of the size of protein, just the palm that you want represented on a meal plate. It's about 2 to 4 ounces of protein, and it can be animal-based protein. It can be plant-based protein. It really doesn't matter. We just want to have protein represented. This slide has a goal number there. It says 70 grams of protein per day. That's kind of like the broad recommendation for new birthing parents. So if you did just have a baby, we want to try to get at least that amount in, but I don't want anyone counting their macros or worried about it. If you just change your mindset, you're going to hit that goal. The other thing I'm going to skip to the right is powders count, right? So we don't have to just be eating a ton of meat if we don't want to. If you get up in the morning and you want a cup of coffee, get a high quality protein powder and dump a scoop of that in your coffee, blend it up. It can make it creamy and frothy, plus just give you 15 grams of protein right there in your coffee. Or if you're going to make pancakes for your kids, I make pancakes for my kids all the time. And I always hide stuff in those pancakes, like protein powder, flax, hemp seeds. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff in there. And so you can just, rely on that to help you hit those numbers. And then the middle one is just about quality. So if you are going to prioritize anything in your diet around quality, I think protein is probably where you would get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So that would be buying organic when you can, buying grass-fed pasture-raised protein powders that come from those animals that were treated really well. Little additives as possible, not a lot of sugar. If you can prioritize quality with protein, that's going to be your biggest bang for your buck. Does that all make sense? Did I leave anything out? Okay.
No, it definitely does. And I know that your tip about putting it in coffee has also helped me a lot, because as somebody who doesn't eat meat, it can be really hard to hit 70. Not if I'm intentional, not if I'm planning my whole day, but if I'm I didn't have time to meal prep and I had to rush to work and I'm just picking up this thing on the go, 70 is actually pretty hard to hit. And being able to put 20 grams of protein in my coffee is huge.
I know, it's such and you feel so accomplished and check mark, mm-hmm. I did it. I got my collagen in.
I had breakfast.
Yes, it feels good. And that also has an added benefit. If you add protein powder to your coffee, it helps reduce the blood sugar spike that comes with drinking coffee, which is actually my next tip. So let me change slides here. Okay. So the next one, and I only have 2 more. So this one and one more after this. is around eating for stable energy levels. And really that's just like a buzz term for balancing your blood sugar. And so blood sugar, in case you guys are not like super familiar with blood sugar, I don't know, I'm probably safe to say everyone has experienced when you haven't eaten in a while and you start to feel shaky.
Oh my God, it's the worst.
Yeah. And like you're hangry, you're like angry at the world and you feel like you need to go take a nap. And then you go eat something that's like full of carbs. And then it's like life is giving again. You feel so much better. Like your energy returns. That is you hacking your blood sugar. So blood sugar is what happens when you eat carbohydrate rich foods. It's fruits, vegetables, breads, pastas, sugar, like any kind of treats that turns to sugar in our bloodstream when we eat it. And to put it in a nutshell, that's how our body produces energy, right? So it uses that sugar to do all of the, important functions that we need to do in order to thrive. The problem is when you have too much of that. So if there's too much blood sugar, then you can feel icky and, cause damage. Inflammation can happen. You can become insulin resistant. Or if it's too low, you feel like the way that we talked about, just jittery and shaky and not feeling good. So both of those things, the swinging back and forth, it can impact what's on this slide, right? So it can cause you to just feel crappy all day long, just like energy levels up, down, just not feeling stable. It can impact your reproductive hormone health. So that's why we want to really make sure that we're eating for, our blood sugars are staying even keel throughout the day. It impacts thyroid health, liver health. I mean, it's just really pivotal to try and not ride that roller coaster. We just want a nice, even road. We don't want to go up and down all day long.
That makes sense.
So how do you do that? There are 3 recommendations that I think make the most impact for balancing your blood sugar. Number 1 is the middle image, which is, can you be like strategic with plating your food? And what I mean by that is when you eat carbs, so if you're going to eat a piece of bread, can you add protein and fat to that bread in order to keep the blood sugar spike lower, right? So if you're just eating bread, it spikes high, but if you add fat, if you add protein, it brings the spike down. So if you have bread, right, then I'm going to turn it into avocado toast, and I'm going to add, some avocado on there for fat. And then I might even add like a fried egg on top and call it a day. And I got my protein, my fat, and my carbs in, and my blood sugar is going to be stable.
You're speaking my language.
I love avocado toast. It's my favorite. I don't care how buzzworthy it is. It's buzzworthy for a reason.
It's buzzworthy because it's delicious.
Yes. So the way that you can think about this when you go to plate your food, again, is what we talked about with protein, right? So just think about protein first and then add your carbs to that. And you're going to be, far and ahead of the game with balancing your blood sugar. The other piece is eating every 2 to 3 hours. So if you are dealing with burnout, if you are in the throes of burned outness, like you feel terrible, we don't want to fast because fasting is stressful on your body. Yes, fasting can be very health promoting in certain situations, but when you're dealing with burnout, fasting is not going to be helpful. It's just detrimental. So we want to eat as soon as you wake up, eat meals, every 3 to 4 hours with snacks in between, all with protein. And then the last one is avoid the things that spike your blood sugar the most whenever possible. But don't be like crazy about it. If you want to have a treat, have a treat. Just, can you include fat and protein with your treat? Can you eat your dessert with your meal instead of eating it separate to spike your blood sugar? Or if you can avoid those things like white breads, white pastas, donuts, cakes, like all of the things that will spike it really high, then avoid or pair them with fat and protein if you can.
That makes sense. I'm also really regretting not eating lunch before this talk.
Oh no. I hope you're not hangry by the end of it.
No, my blood sugar is okay for now.
I just have, this is like a reference slide.
This is cool.
Yeah, in case, I know I live in an echo chamber of nutrition. And so I know not everybody knows exactly what carbs, proteins, and fats are. And some foods have both, right? Multiple things in them. So eggs are fat and protein, and beans are protein and carbohydrate. So there's lots of charts like this online that you can find. It's just nice to have a little reference you can put up on your fridge and help you kind of have a little cheat sheet. I'm on to the last food recommendation. So thank you for bearing with me.
You're doing great.
But yeah, all of these things are important. And again, just small changes in each one of these areas will reap huge rewards. So you don't have to do all of this stuff at once, right? You can just pick one or two things. The last tip is around eating more real foods. So what does that even mean? So when I say real foods, that is anything that walked on land, swam in the sea, or grew from the ground, right? And has the most minimal amount of processing steps as possible. The reason why we focus on these foods is because they have the most nutrients. And when you are depleted, then we need to replete, we need to replenish them. And the only way to do that is to eat foods that contain those nutrients and take supplements. Supplements come after food, though. We will always want to prioritize food. And the best way to do that is just to eat more of them and whenever you can. So this is another one of those mindset things with eating more real foods. So you go to the kitchen, you're like, I am newly postpartum and I just want a freaking bowl of cereal. Go have your cereal and enjoy it, but ask yourself, how can I make this more nutritious? And well, we know we want to prioritize protein, and you have a batch of hard-boiled eggs in the fridge. So I'm just going to go grab a hard-boiled egg to eat alongside my bowl of cereal. And I got a whole bunch of vitamins and minerals from that egg. I got healthy fats and I got protein. Bam. Like I just added a bunch of nutrition. So that's what we want to do here, right? So how can we just make the food that we're eating more nutritious by adding more real foods?
Yeah, more like what do we add in rather than what do we take away? I know that my mom always used to say, and I don't know who she got this from, or if this was an original thought, although I feel like nothing's original thought these days. My mom, when I was growing up, would always say, like, the real food is on the outside of the grocery store because it's in the cooler section. Like everything in the inside isn't real food. It's all of like the hyper processed treat stuff that we don't necessarily want to eat, whereas all the real stuff lives on the edge. And I still think about that when I go to the grocery store. I'm like, okay, if I go into the center, I can get the treats, but like that cannot be the primary food that I eat this week.
Yes. Okay. I love that. Yeah. That's what we say in nutritional therapy. We shop the aisles, shop the perimeter of the grocery store. That's where the real foods lie. And you know what? We live in an awesome time where some processed food companies are kind of getting hip to this, and they are removing a lot of the crappy ingredients. And so there are some really great cracker options and chip options and things like that. So we don't have to deprive ourselves, right? We can go.
And what you told me when we talked about this recently was frozen vegetables are still real food. That's right. Frozen stuff is still, it counts.
Oh my gosh, it absolutely counts. I am a nutritionist who is pro convenience, right? So especially new parents. One of my favorite things to do is I buy frozen rice, and then I buy frozen cauliflower rice, and I microwave both of those things. And then I mix them together, add butter and salt. And that's an awesome side dish. Amazing. And my kids eat it because they think it's rice, because it does taste like rice, because there's brown rice in there, but there's cauliflower rice in there too. Right. So it's kind of sneaky. But yeah, use your freezer, use your pantry to its fullest potential, especially in that early postpartum, time frame. You don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be.
Those were all super helpful, and I haven't seen more questions come through, but if anybody has questions, please drop them in the chat. That was really helpful. And what I love about those tips is that they're all they're not time intensive. It's not time intensive to drink more water if you just have to think about it and have a water bottle near you. It's not time intensive to eat more protein if you're just mindful of what are the easy ways to add it back in. So that's really helpful. I love those tips. Thank you.
Yay. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. I know it's 1:46. I want to leave time for Q&A, but our last question is about stress. A lot of pregnant, postpartum people, a lot of people in general are under stress, and we know that affects our well-being, and we know it affects recovery, but what kind of impact does stress have on postpartum recovery, on overall well-being?
Yeah, I also want to leave time for questions, so I'm going to go super fast on this one, which is unfortunate because this is a really important topic. But the terrible, ugly, like awful truth is that you can be eating the most brilliant diet ever and still not get better. And even with like pelvic floor work, right? You could be doing all of this work with you, and yet you're still not seeing like the amount of improvement that you want. It could be related to stress, right? It's emotional, mental well-being. It has a profound physical impact on our ability to heal. And that's why it has to be a major component to any sort of nutrition plan, any sort of healing plan. If you don't take care of the mental side of things, then it's just going to derail your progress on the other stuff. So that's why we have to pair them together. With early parenthood, you'll see like memes and things of like, oh, you know, mom just needs to go get a massage or like go to the spa or whatever. And that's great. We love self-care. Self-care is a big component to this, but we really have to go deeper in order to see the improvements. And that's around taking uncomfortable action, right, in your life. So things like, do you need to talk to a therapist if you can afford it or have access to it? Do you need to set stronger boundaries with the people around you in your life or your work? Can you, or are you willing to say no more often to people? Ask for help more often. Seek support from other types of professionals. Those are kinds of the hard stress management things that make the most difference.
And they're the things that don't feel good necessarily. I think that's what's difficult is a lot of times you hear people talking about self-care and it's like, get a massage, meditate. And I mean, actually, I'm a huge fan of meditation. I promote it to most people that I work with, but yeah, I mean, like seeking out care, making time for therapy is not the stuff that feels good, like taking a bath or getting a massage, and it can make a huge difference. It's a really good point.
Totally. And then the other piece is, those are some of the big items, but then the other like side of self-care for new parents is what is the smallest possible thing that you can do for yourself that feels good that will help you stay afloat, right? So I'm going to give everyone homework on this call, and whoever's watching this, set aside 10 minutes, grab a journal and a piece of paper and a pen, a journal, whatever. And I want you to start writing down all of the things that make you feel like you. So what are the things that make you feel like you? And that they should be small, right? So filing my nails feels good. Planning a meal, cooking dinner, listening to a podcast, going for a 10-minute walk, sitting in the sun. What are those free things that don't take a lot of effort that make you feel like you? And then set a goal to do one of those things on that list every single day. Because again, it's the smallest things that have the biggest impacts. Getting a massage is wonderful, but if you do these small things every day, that will keep you afloat, right? That will keep you above that pull to burnout. It's just going to keep you going. And that's what we want to focus on. Like, what can we do that takes no time and effort that keeps us afloat and above that stress level?
Yeah. And I mean, like, this is one of the things that I love about what you do is that it's tangible, it's doable, it's realistic, right? Like in that for physical therapy is a huge thing that we focus on. Like we can come up with the perfect plan, but if it's not realistic, it's never going to happen. Yeah. And I would argue that no matter where people are in life, they could take 5 minutes to sit outside or take 5 minutes to, file their nails or like, put on mascara, like whatever the thing is. Water a plant, like I think that really when we break it down to bite-sized realistic pieces and chunks, like a lot of this stuff is doable if you start by picking one thing. And even for people listening, if that means starting with that homework assignment and not starting with increasing hydration, because that's 2 things in that one, like just one thing at a time. And oftentimes we do that with our PT plans of cares too. It's like, you're going to go home and you're going to do this one exercise and it's going to take you 3 minutes, but you're going to do it every freaking day. And then we're going to build on that, because then when we give you 2, that's 4 minutes and that's doable too. And I know that that's the approach that you take in your services, and it's huge.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. We are so aligned in that. It's the consistency over like the stress of being perfect, right?
So consistency over complexity every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much.
And that is, I know that you have more to say on the topic, but for our listeners, that's our last main question and talking point. So if anybody has questions now, please feel free to start dumping them into the chat or into the Q&A. And Amber, if you, while people are coming up with their questions or while people are writing them in, if you could just tell us a little bit about your services, how people can find you, how they can work with you, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sounds great. So you can find me at amberdawnwellness.com. And I am a health coach, nutritional therapist. I work with new parents to, again, identify those areas in their lives and their bodies that are out of balance. And I help build a plan to bring those things back into balance that feels doable. And we work one-on-one together, usually for about 6 months. So it's a long stretch of time where you can kind of go through the ups and downs of life with support and see what it's like to stick to these habits and build these new routines with me there kind of holding your hand. But you can find me at amberdawnwellness.com. I would love anyone watching to follow me on Instagram. I share free tips, tricks, all kinds of stuff there. My handle is amberdawn_wellness, and Dawn is
sharing these things in
DAWN.
the chat too.
Awesome. And then, this talk may have been overwhelming to you. There's lots of things that I said, but if you go to my website, there is a guide that you can download, and it's 5 ways to feel less exhausted in parenthood and start feeling better right now. And it has like the top 5 tips there with all of the recommendations. So if you didn't take notes or anything like that, you can just go download that guide and start with that.
Perfect. Well, I put your website in the chat. I put your Instagram handle in the chat. You can find that free download on her website. And it looks like we just got a question from Alyssa. And she said, I just want to acknowledge that many patients experience both food apartheid and time poverty. Are there any ways to address burnout within these life dynamics? Any mindful mantras to help when at our most stressed out moments? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that's like super real, right? Like food deserts. You may be in an area where you can't just go into a Whole Foods, or you don't have the money to, go buy like grass-fed, pasture-raised meat at the grocery store. And that is a real thing that I hope we're able to figure out in the next like 10 years in our country. But I am a huge believer in that small changes have a huge impact, right? And so if you can focus on those things that you have access to by drinking more water, or if you are able to buy animal products or any kinds of fruits and vegetables, it doesn't matter the quality, it doesn't matter like where you source them. If they're real foods, they are going to give you those benefits that you are looking for. And again, you don't have to be perfect in any of these things. It's just picking like the smallest items that you feel are doable, that you have access to and can actually implement and stay consistent with, like we talked about. That's what's going to be important. And you will, I promise you, get some benefits from those things. And then the mantra. So I have so many mantras that I love to use with clients, but one that I have found that like speaks to me the most is when I'm about to lose my shit, pardon my French, when I'm about to like just explode because everything is too much. I like to remind myself that this is temporary. So I'll just kind of like go into this place in my mind and kind of say it over and over again, like, this is temporary. This is temporary. Like, I will not always feel this way. Things will not always be this way. I'm going to take my next step, just keep my face looking forward and do what the next right thing is for me, and know that this feeling will pass. This is temporary. Everything is a phase. That really, really helps me in my hard times.
Thank you for that. I think that's really helpful. And also thank you to Alyssa for calling that out, because food deserts and time poverty are both huge issues for a lot of new parents in the United States. And I think that the thing that I really appreciate about Amber is that, and for those of you hopping off, thank you so much for joining. But the things that I really appreciate about Amber is that a lot of these tips are not time or money intensive, like sea salt, right? Like sea salt is something that you can find at, I think, a lot of like local corner stores or Amazon, and increasing water intake and protein, even if it's a hard-boiled egg, right? Like there are easy ways and cheap ways and affordable and not time-intensive ways to do some of this stuff. And I think that better, not perfect is a big thing that we tell our patients too, like better, not perfect. Nobody is going to do this perfectly. Nobody, I mean, like short of hiring a professional cook and having all the time in the world to work out and outsourcing your childcare and not needing a full-time job, like that's how we reach perfection. Even then it's not realistic, but like these small things that we can do to be better and not perfect, I think can make a big, big difference. And I know that in my life where I have no time, despite leaving a job originally to create a work life where I have more time, I know that a lot of these little tips have been really, really helpful. So thank you for bringing that up. And thank you, Amber, for making a lot of this stuff accessible and doable.
Yay, she's going to have a jug of water with sea salt.
Yes. Same. I will add that to my lunch.
Yeah.
I am still scanning for other questions. I haven't seen anything else come through, so we can hang for another couple minutes and see if anything pops up. But Amber, thank you so much for spending your time and giving us your knowledge. It's been really, really helpful. And I know that for me, this is going to be amazing for conversations that I can have with my patients too. And I'm really excited to share this with my team. And I just really appreciate all that you do and also the way that you approach it, because I know that nutrition can be very overwhelming and it can feel really impossible. And I think that the way that you approach it just makes it feel like anybody can do at least a little bit better. Damn, funny how adding salt to water just totally slipped my mind. Pregnancy brain is real, y'all.
It is real. It's
Very
real. Your brain is changing. It changes. Yeah. It remodels itself in pregnancy. So you have a real reason why that is a thing.
Yeah. No, it is real. Well, okay. I don't see any more questions coming through and we are about to hit the hour mark. So I think that that's our time, but this recording will live on our YouTube channel. It'll live on our blog. Amber, I will share it with you when it's ready, but please feel free to share with your friends if you found this talk helpful. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Yay. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. So, next time, hopefully it'll be next time. We can talk again.
Heck yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.